Kathy?
Yes.
Great. All right. I'll share my screen. See. All right. Make sure it's sharing. Give me just a second here. All right, screen one. Okay, so I'm hoping everyone who wanted to join was able to join. I know there was some last minute changes in the section. Figured I'd give folks a couple seconds to join if they had not, and hopefully we'll be able to check to make sure if anyone's on the other session that it gets updated. Let me go ahead. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, Sharon.
Yes, we can choose screen share.
Great. All right. I'm trying to make sure, just a second here. I'm trying to make sure that I'm presenting because it looks like not. There we go. Better. Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? So hopefully everyone is here for the new project manager training. We've done a few of these sessions, but it's been a couple months since we did them, and we'll be doing them every month going forward. We're going to follow the same agenda and protocol that we did in the last couple, but I'll go over that again with you guys quickly here. So the first is we really want to make sure we're able to get through all of the material. So if you have any questions, please share them in the chat. We will make sure to get those answered. We're going to try and slate some time at the end of each section, but if we don't get to it, then I promise we will do a follow-up with you, but we want to make sure we kind of get a good flow to the material and that everyone's able to get that consumed. So if you don't mind, just if you have questions, put them in the chat. Another item that I don't have here is we are recording this session. In order to get a better quality recording, if everyone except for the presenter can turn their camera off so that and mute yourself so that we get better quality when we put the recording together. We will be taking some breaks along the way, some just quick 5 minutes, 1 15-minute break. During that time, unfortunately, we have to close the Zoom and you'll have to re-click to get back in. And again, that's for the recordings. It's the only way we can stop the recording to get the size of files that we need in order to make that available later. Lastly, we are taking roll here. So if you have joined this and you joined with just your phone, if you could change, you can change actually your phone number to your name so that we know you're here. If you're having trouble doing that, if you can please just make sure to put your name in the chat that you are here if we're not able to see your name in the Zoom. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So our agenda for today, first, we're going to do a quick introduction, which is this 30 minutes, go through a little bit of the journey to get us here, and then kind of where we're headed, what this past year has looked like. And then after that, we'll jump into the stage gate process, which is our framework. And it's the PM's main guide to set expectations about what you need to do through the life cycle of the project, as well as what your deliverables are and how you navigate through that. So it is essentially a primary guide for a PM executing an IT project. And this is regardless of funding. So just to be clear, Everything I'm going to go over here, if it is an IT project with an IT project manager, it follows this. There are no exceptions related to if funding's coming from other places or that. If it's an IT project, we follow this. Status reporting will be our next topic. So trying to get you level set it on what you should include in your status reports and even how you go into ServiceNow and enter your status reports. And then portfolio health. Once you get the status report out there, it gets extracted into a portfolio level dashboard that then goes into some leadership reviews for IT leadership. So I'll talk a little bit about how that happens and then things you should be considering when you're doing your status reporting as the portfolio health dashboards are put together. We'll take a 15-minute break and then we'll talk about risk and issue management. We're really going to focus more on risk management. This session will be a little bit different than the previous sessions. We are really going into 2022, have a heavy focus on being proactive and doing risk management to help prevent some of the issues that we've seen in the past. We're even going to start working on a lessons learned repository so that you can go out and search for things that have happened to other projects to determine if it is a risk that you should be trying to mitigate on your project. We're going to get eventually very deep into contingency management at a risk level and even doing risk identification at an activity level in your schedule. So the 2020 plan has us starting to really dive into risk. So we really wanted to get a little bit better at talking through the risk identification, as well as how do you manage that throughout your project. And then the last topic we'll cover today is going to be estimation. Estimation, this is the tool that was created for formal gated projects, and it is to create a basis of estimate when you're doing your business case. So at the very beginning, when you're doing your business case, this will create a ROM level estimate. And it really is intended to be used as your basis of estimate so that you can look back later and see where things have changed as you gain more information as the project moves forward. And it'll allow you to kind of reference back and say, oh, this is why I need more or less dollars. This is what has changed since the beginning kind of thing. So it really gives you that very sound basis of estimate at the beginning. We are going to be making that mandatory in the future for formal gated projects. And the reason we're going to be doing that is so that we can start level setting on what can be expected in that ROM level estimate as you bring that business case forward. So once we can get everyone using that tool for those estimations where it fits, then we can kind of say, okay, we understand what's making up your estimate because we have consistently used the same model for creating an estimate across projects. So that is coming soon as well. So it's going to be a key topic at the end of the day. Then we'll wrap up and let you guys move on. So we know this is a lot to cover. We'll do our best to cover it as quickly, succinctly, and efficiently as possible, and then try and get in as many questions as we can. So I didn't do an intro of myself. For those who have not met me, my name is Sharon Billiard. I was brought in October of last year when the CIDO realized there wasn't really a centralized project management office or function that created standard project management across the IT portfolio. There wasn't even really good visibility into what projects are running, how healthy they are, where should the focus be from an IT leadership perspective. Each tower essentially ran their own projects without really a standard way across of doing that. And I think that was part of the product model that was put in the past. The direction was changed with this to create a centralized IT PMO. I was brought in really just to help with, kind of set that up, create the framework, start rolling this stuff out. So we brought in a team of folks that are really experts in this space and put together a phase one, which I'll go through in just a second to kind of kick off this journey for PSEG IT. So why are we here? As I said, around the end of last year, with the recognition that there was no centralized IT PMO function, the CIDO decided to bring in KPMG to start looking at not just how do I get this moving, but what exists today. So do a quick, assessment of where we are, where are our pain points, where are we struggling, and then really design those capabilities and the plan for delivering those capabilities to the organization. So there was this Project Excellence initiative. That's a strategic initiative that was kicked off and reviewed with the board to create this centralized function. And really, it was about these things. It's about building a mature organization and toolbox for executing and delivering projects in a more predictable and transparent manner. So it's really about how do we put things in place that we can get better at this and be able to keep improving on this, so we get a little bit more predictable commitment dates, budget estimates, all these things that go into delivering for the business partners. A lot more visibility and oversight into the portfolio. So end of last year, there really wasn't a dashboard across the portfolio that showed, kind of apples to apples, this is how projects are performing, and this is the areas that we're struggling. How can we get help in these specific areas? That's what the portfolio health dashboard was meant to begin to assist with. But in order to really deliver that visibility, you need to be running all projects in a consistent framework, in a standard framework. So, there's some foundational things that need to happen before you can get that visibility and that transparency, or even understand what does, behind budget mean over here versus behind budget here, that sort of thing. So it's really around looking at that investment portfolio with transparency and accountability. And then also from a methodology standpoint. So in order to really expect project managers to do this, we have to give them some tools, give them some guidance, set expectations as to here's the framework you should be living within, here's how we're going to govern that, here is really, all of the tools you need to be able to apply and deliver to those expectations. And then in order to support that, you need some organization in place. Someone needs to be responsible for the processes. Someone needs to be responsible for the tools, and also responsible for providing the support that a PM needs in order to actually do that. So that's really around the organization, and it needed to be formed in 2021. So you'll see it really became the center of the journey for 2021. And then finally, you need automation. You need tools to help make following these processes more efficient. So you're not spending more time trying to create templates or use templates or get data from a system and that kind of thing. Your tools need to facilitate from beginning to end the life cycle of that project. So automation is the last place really that is impacted by this Project Excellence initiative. So that started end of last year. We started thinking about that and having some discussions with the teams about what was in place, what was available to us, what things were out there, even if not standardized, and then where were those pain points? So like, where were the teams struggling? There were a lot of themes in those around resource capacity planning and things like that. And so what we did is there is a 16 capability model that we use to really determine the maturity of the organization in all these areas related to not just delivery of a project, but planning of a portfolio, deciding you even want to do that project, to initiating that project, to delivering that project, and then everywhere in between until the whole portfolio of projects close out and get in service. So this really kind of highlights the 16 capabilities we tend to look at to see how mature an organization is. So as part of the phase one at the end of last year, beginning of this year, we said, okay, let's look at where you are in all of these. It was maturity-wise not really advanced in a lot of these areas. So we said, okay, where are your priorities? Let's set the priorities of what we want to do in 2021 to bring that forward. So we know we need to stand up an organization to support this, but along with that, what capabilities do we want to improve on? So that was the setting of the scope for phase one. So as part of phase one, we really got very foundational. So what we found is because you didn't have standardized processes around what is delivered in a project, at what stage is that delivered, how do you move from one stage to the next? You had some projects that were designing without a plan. You had some projects that was spinning in the planning cycle for, 6 months, a year or longer. So it was all over the place. It didn't really have, there wasn't really a clear, like, this is my deliverables in each stage, and I shouldn't be moving to the next stage until I've completed these deliverables and got sign off that they're adequate and that we're ready to move on, so that we don't have to go back later and redo our requirements document after design, kind of thing. The other thing is standardized schedule management. Because there wasn't a standardized template or a standard tool being utilized, there was really no way to determine the resource capacity requirements across all of these projects. It wasn't, oh, I'm going to need, my implementations here. I'm going to need an infrastructure person. I'm going to need, like, there's no clear way to decipher that across all of the projects. Some project plans went very, very detailed, very deep. Others that were really large projects just had this high level milestone type view, and the vendor was keeping it. PSEG didn't have a lot of insight into that. So it was all over the place. So getting that standardized so that we can start capturing resource needs, start capturing cash flow of our projects based on all the activities that need to take place, and then kind of get it level set so that we can, at least at a milestone level, roll these up to a portfolio and say, half of our projects are going to be in design by August, half are going to be, so we kind of get an idea of how we're tracking to our commitments at a portfolio level as well. So the schedule management is really about setting some expectations and getting the PM help in creating their initial plans and getting expectations about when you create that plan, what level does it need to go to, what needs to be in there, and are there some standard activities that we should build in if this is an app development plan or an infrastructure plan, or if this is a large, new technology, solution that we've never used here before, or, so with the variations in the types of plans that need to exist. Cost management was another one that seemed pretty inconsistent. Like, some people keep their budgets at a very detailed level and seem to really be able to hone in when they're having control, cost type issues, meaning all of a sudden my activities have moved out here. Now my forecasts are being bunched into December. I know I won't have people to work that much. I need to, even in, September or earlier, start thinking about, do I need to move budget into 2022? Or is there something I can do to parallel work in 1 month prior to getting there? So, like, starting to look at the financial decisions as a PM you should be driving based on that cost information. So some projects had that level, other projects did not. They were essentially just moving their dollars out every month, assuming that the work could eventually be done, which, as we know, can be problematic from a financial reporting standpoint. And then risk and issues management, having a consistent place to do it, even to the point of, we saw a lot of qualitative risk assessments being done, but not a lot of quantitative risk assessments. So there was a lot of, a storm could happen, and that was it. It's like, storm can delay me. It didn't really talk about how much, like, what does that do to you? Like, does that cost you X amount of dollars? So what does that impact look like if a storm hits you in June? Kind of thing. So kind of getting into more detailed risk management, really doing quantitative risk assessments. We didn't really see a lot of that. Most of what we saw was really just this high level identifying things that could go wrong. And it didn't look like it was consistently being done. Like, it was done at the beginning or done at a report, level if you had to go to your steering committee, but not something that was actively being managed by the team in a constant, trying to mitigate things so that they don't turn into issues for your project. Project status reporting is another area, just not a lot of consistency in that. And what that prevented us from doing was creating a portfolio level dashboard. So you don't have standard project status reporting. It's really hard to tell at a portfolio level, how are your projects performing? And then where should the leadership attention be to help remove barriers so these projects can move forward? The problem projects can move forward. So this was set up as the scope of the foundation phase, which was in 2021. As part of that, like I said, we're also in parallel trying to stand up an organization. There was no centralized PMO prior to this year. So early in the year, we did set up an interim PMO, which was staffed with contractors, but the intent was to bring in leadership from within PSEG and set up these groups. The way it is currently set up, so we have a senior director of project services, this which is Rich Brenton. He is now all onboarded and very engaged with this team, as well as he is also senior director over the Energy Cloud Transformation Management Office. So his scope really includes both the IT EPMO as well as the TMO for Energy Cloud. IT EPMO, just to kind of give you guys some perspective on what's the difference. IT EPMO sets the project level standards and sets all of the guidance and governance around and oversight around how should we be delivering projects, as well as IT EPMO is a keeper of the plan of projects. So everything under the IT EPMO projects umbrella sits in the IT EPMO. That governance, oversight, standard processes, standard tools, all of that sits within the IT EPMO, as well as your controller function and your scheduling function. So to ensure that all schedulers are operating the same, ensure that all controllers are operating the same, those all sit under your IT EPMO. Your TMO is really a program specific. It's like the company has decided to invest in this large program that requires another level of reporting, another level of governance than most of your standard IT projects. So that team is formed because they have specialized reporting, specialized oversight that is needed at a program level. So your projects would be run underneath, but then you have another level of program level management that needs to exist to bring it all together and have it be presented back out to your stakeholders as a single transformational program. And they tend to span not just IT, but they generally have a lot of other like really large business projects that are happening in parallel. And you need both of those to get the benefit that is articulated in the business case for that transformational program. So it adopts all of the standards created in the IT EPMO, but adds another layer of governance and oversight because it's such a large program. There is a director of IT EPMO that has not been designated yet. There's a manager of operations. Under operations, it's portfolio management, process templates, tools. They're the folks that should be auditing, that make sure you're ready to move through gates, training, communication, metrics. So pretty hefty load for that operations team. And Upasana is the leader of that team. Nicole Johnson is the leader of the scheduling team. They are responsible for project resource cost loaded schedule management, including standards. We are using P6 for that. They will eventually be the ones who are producing the resource capacity reporting, integrated planning and reporting. So they really are facilitating the standards, but also their actual schedulers assigned to the projects to work with those PMs to create those plans, to make sure it follows the standards, to make sure we're capturing the right level of information to be able to do resource capacity planning and integrated planning and reporting. So they're really driving us to a level of maturity in our scheduling that will meet the objectives for project excellence. The controlling organization, I've been sitting in trying to help, at least from a lead perspective, an interim lead. However, we are bringing in a manager over controlling. So this will be someone who's going to create all of the standards related to the controller and the cost management function. So project budgeting, project budget management, accruals, cash flow management, and forecasting. But they're also going to start to provide more portfolio level views of, kind of how is our cash laying out across the year, and being able to give confidence to our leadership that we can spend what's in our forecast. So if you hit December and across our entire portfolio, it shows we have, 60 million to spend in December, we know that's not possible. We don't have the people to do that. We don't have, that kind of, so it helps us to start to look at a portfolio level, how reasonable our spend and our forecasting is. There's a lot of other functions that will be built in there around contingency management eventually. So across our projects, how much contingency are we storing in these projects? And do we really think the risk of our portfolio is so high that we're actually going to spend all of that contingency dollar? So just different things like that, that really, they'll start to be able to add that level of insight to our IT leadership about, from a financial perspective, our commitments and then our delivery to those commitments. So this is the current organization for the EPMO. As you could see, the project manager role, scheduler role, and controller role work very closely together. So all of these really to add, and we are creating a RACI that will be available in the next release of our assets to kind of show across each stage and activity within a stage, who's responsible for what, who's the responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's just informed. But the PM is ultimately responsible for successful delivery of the project in every case. That's pretty standard. That's the role, that's the responsibility. Project management is responsible for successful delivery. We provide these two support functions so the project manager can focus on driving the work, can focus on using the information provided by the scheduler and controller to make decisions. So scheduler comes in and says, hey, I'm seeing 12 other projects with this exact same person's name on it, and the exact same week that you think you're going to have them full time, you have an issue here. Like, we have to start having conversations about, do we need to bring in a contractor, that kind of thing. Controller may say, hey, I noticed that you have $10 million that needs to be spent between now and the end of the year. Based on what you've been spending about $1 million a month. That seems pretty unreasonable. Do you need to maybe either parallel some work, shuffle things around, bring your contractor in earlier to get some things done that you were planning to do next year? Or do we need to provide a more accurate forecast for what we're actually going to spend and move some of that work out? So these are the types of things that I would expect the scheduler and controller to bring to the PM, and the PM to then use to make decisions and drive the work to the commitments. So it really, these two become very key functions. Now, scheduler and controller should be in sync, should be working together. Scheduler says, hey, we moved some activities out. It looks like it's going to move your cash flow out. Controller picks that up and then says, hey, PM, I've updated the forecast based on what we're seeing as far as how the work's getting done. Are you in agreement with that? Do you agree? Are we comfortable with that? Or do we need to do something to update your schedule so that your dollars don't get moved out? So all working together, the two at the bottom working very closely together to provide the right information to the PM. I included in here, and you'll get a copy of all of this, the model for the controller scheduler charges, just because we get so many questions about that. The way that it was set up is based on the categorization, and we'll get to the next section on the categorization of projects. But once we get through that, this is really just to help you understand your project, what it should be getting charged back based on the size of the project for your scheduler and controller. We do have a SharePoint site that was set up as part of phase 1 that has playbooks and processes, tools and templates. So when we talk about deliverables later, we have templates created for those. Those templates are available in our SharePoint site. We have training materials. So this recording, previous recordings of this training, all available on the SharePoint site. This is where we're currently managing our IT EPMO assets. So when we do a release coming next month, we're gonna release a copy of a RACI. That RACI will show here. It'll be in the newsletter, we'll reference it. additional communications as we roll it out for the release, but this is where you would find all of the material that we use in the PMO to drive the projects. You'll also see there's a training calendar on here, which this session was on, and you'll see other sessions for the rest of the quarter. So if you go to the website, you can definitely, SharePoint site, you can definitely click on that training calendar and see that coming. And then finally, this is how you reach us. So we do have weekly IT PMO office hours that you just click into the Zoom link. Somebody is waiting there. If they can't help you, they will direct you to the right person, and we'll schedule a one-on-one session with you. We have a PMO email, and then you can also submit a ServiceNow ticket. This helps us better drive, like looking at where we're seeing the most issues, that kind of thing, that can eventually drive training sessions or communications or changes in the processes. All right, with that, I am 1 minute over, but we'll quickly move to the next part of this, which is going to be, oh, wrong one, sorry, StageGate. Sorry, I gotta do this every time, but I can't see. There we go. No, I can see it. I can't see the buttons. There we go. Okay, so StageGate process. As I mentioned previously, for PMs, this is very, very important. We are going to start everything will center around which stage you're in, what gate you're in, and the deliverables related to those. Even our cyber partners are creating deliverables that are dictated for cyber compliance and adherence on projects, and we're integrating that into our StageGate process. So StageGate process is the framework that dictates how a PM should be planning and working their project. So which stages you should have, what deliverables within each stage you should have, and it's also what our PMO ops team is going to use to verify that you are ready to move to the next stage, that you have completed the deliverables that are in there, and that you have the okay to move forward. Eventually, this is going to be facilitated by our new project tracking system that is coming out end of this year, beginning of next year. I'm sorry, I'm getting an echo. Am I not on mute? If the ops team can mute whoever is not on mute, thank you. So it's very important that you understand this and that you follow it. I used to have, when I was doing PM work, and I was following one very similar to this, actually almost this exact one. I used to have a one-page card sitting at my desk. And when I started a project or started planning a project, this is what I used to envision kind of what needed to be done. And then when did I think these things could be done? You will see our project schedule templates. The standard milestones are based on the StageGate process. So it should even trickle into your actual building of your project schedule. The ops team is the governing body over the StageGate process. They ensure compliance. They will even pretty soon be doing compliance reporting, meaning they're going to start pulling reports and auditing projects to see who is following this and who is not. So it is really important that you understand it and that you're able to follow it. It is not a one size fits all. So we understand you may have a high dollar infrastructure project that is primarily hardware purchases and not very complex, repeatable, you do it all the time, or a fiber project where it's the same schedule, it's the same list of activities, just in different geographic locations that you're moving around. That does not require the same amount of rigor as a brand new Salesforce system or a brand new SAP system. That is complex, high investment, lots of integrations, lots of people, contractors involved, like different vendors. So when you get into those areas, you're going to need a lot more rigor in your project management oversight than, some of these other smaller or repeatable routine sort of projects. So we do account for that in this, and I'll show you how to do that. So this is the main visual. This is the one we want everyone to be familiar with. We want to make sure that everyone knows this picture and how to use it. This is the waterfall. There is one for Agile as well, and I'll show you that next. Not a lot of changes, because the more we talk to the folks in the organization, the more we realize from a funding perspective, these first couple of stages are actually always waterfall. There is no Agile funding that happens here from what we can tell. And there's no Agile planning. It's really kind of what you would expect for waterfall. The Agile comes in when you start doing what would traditionally have been requirements gathering or sprint planning to actual releases. So it's really these three here: develop, initial design, and direct and manage is where you start to see the biggest difference from an Agile perspective here at PSEG. So I'll go through how to read this first. So at the top here, you'll see create concept, then develop business case, project initiation, develop initial design, direct and manage, and post deployment. These are your stages. So these are the stages that every project should go through sequentially in a waterfall. Within that, or between those, you'll see these diamonds. These diamonds are your gates. So the purpose of a gate is to set a checkpoint where, as a steering committee, as a project sponsor, as well as a project team, you stop, make sure you're comfortable you've done adequate work and deliverables that are required prior. Meaning if you're in, project initiation, you've done adequate planning to start the next stages. So it's to make sure that you have adequately completed everything you needed to complete in this stage in order to move forward. But it's also a check-in with your project sponsor or steering committee to really figure out, are we still on the right track? Are we still going to deliver the business value that PSEG wants to see from this investment? So I came in with a business case, or I came in with an idea, and is it still worth it? Or do we need a correct course? Is there, all of a sudden there's this other project that has come in that's bringing a technology that we think we could leverage here, but we didn't know that or didn't factor it in earlier. So it's really a checkpoint to make sure at every stage, at the end of every stage, that you don't need to change course, that we're still on the right track, we're still getting the value. If we hit develop initial design, the end of that stage, and we have a high level design created, and we look at that, are we still going to get what we need to get out of this? Or is this only going to hold this for a year? And now we know we probably need to make another investment. So it's really checking in with your primary stakeholders to make sure you should still keep marching forward with your current plan. So the first gate is review concept gate. This whole first stage is just an idea. It's not really been formed yet. You don't have a business case. It's just an idea of something either the business has brought forward they would like to see based on a business problem that exists, or based on some market disruption that's happening, or it's an IT project based on where we know the life cycle of our product is. So if it's going out of support pretty soon, it may come from something like that as well. So it's really anywhere where an idea that we need to have a project is generated. This gate, a review concept, is really where we stop and say, it's going to take us some dollars and some resources, usually O&M dollars and resources, to put together a business case to really decide if we want to move forward with this project. That gate is to get that level of okay. So I think it's going to take me about a month to develop a business case. I may need to bring in a vendor to help me figure out if this is even feasible. I may need, internal resources to help me figure out what potentially, I'm even proposing as a solution here at a high level, or what my estimated cost would be. So this gate is really to say, this is what I think it'll cost me to create the business case. Is leadership on board with spending that O&M dollar on that, or those resources on that, or really the time to get that business case done? So that's what that gate does. The second one is, the second stage is developing that business case. So there's a couple audiences for a business case. Funding, as well as technology strategy alignment. So in some cases, it's the same governing body. In some cases, there is, if you notice at the bottom here, URB. If they're the ones who are supplying funding, they're going to also be the audience of this business case, but it will also go through this business case challenge team gate. And that business case challenge team is really there to make sure across IT, we are proposing a solution that aligns with where we want to head from a technology perspective, and that everyone that represents all the areas of IT agrees this is the right direction to head in. Ideally, you want to do that and get that before you go to get funding from your outside utility, review board or any other funding body that exists outside of IT. So really you want to make sure, yes, this does align. All of our IT leadership is pro move this forward. Now I just need to go get funding to make it happen. And in some cases, the funding is coming from IT. And in those cases, you would only have to go through the business case challenge team. But this is really develop that business case and present that to ensure you have technology strategy alignment as well as funding from a business perspective. The next stage is really heavy planning, right? It's like where you kick off your project. So now I have funding, I get my PM assigned, get my controller and scheduler assigned, and now I really need to go put together a plan and kick this project off. I need to set a baseline for my schedule. I need to make sure that I have we call it project execution plan, which I've heard it called many different things. It's really a combination of your charter, and it's really a combination of your charter and your project management plan, or your goals, which is like essentially your governance, oversight, execution, and support model. So now I know at a high level what I'm being asked to do, and then the PM puts together this to say, okay, based on what I'm being asked to do, this is how I'm going to manage that. This is how I'm going to run this project to deliver you that. And that's this project execution plan. So this is heavy, getting the right support resources in place from a PMO standpoint. This is planning, getting your code set up for your project and kicking your project off. And getting agreement on how it's going to be managed. You'll also set up your steering committee here if you require a steering committee, or whatever your governance cadence is going to be, you would set that up here. So this is really full engagement. This is probably an extremely heavy lift for the PM and the scheduler at this point. You're really digging in on how you're going to manage this and what your plan is going to look like. After you get past that, there's an initial readiness gate. This should be where you're baselining that plan. You've got an agreement from all your stakeholders that the plan is the right way. You've gotten all the input. You've done that qualitative risk assessment. I know how risky this project is. If I can recommend mitigation plans to avoid my high probability risk or high impact risk from happening, I've done that. I've had those conversations. I've incorporated the contingency in my schedule. I've incorporated it into my budget. Like, this is where you kind of level set on. PM has had a chance to look at everything at a much more detailed level. Like, let's baseline here. Then next, so once you get past that, then you're really in develop initial design. Develop initial design is traditionally your analysis stage. It's your requirement stage. It's really where you go in and say, here are all my detailed functional, technical, and otherwise requirements, maybe cyber, whatever it is. Here are all my requirements to the level that I know them. And then I am going to get sign off from all of the stakeholders that this is a full list of requirements. You're starting to think about traceability to your design and your test cases at the end. So you're going to have to come back later and prove that you delivered all of these successfully. So this is really, you're starting to dig into your requirements, And at a high level, this is what I think we're going to deliver. Not detailed components, but at a high level, this is the picture to match these requirements and what at a high level solution, I think the direction we're going to be headed in. You're also going to, in this stage, do quantitative risk assessment. So this is where you get out of a storm may hit and start thinking, if a storm hits, these three things will occur on my project. And this is what I think each one of these could cost us. You start getting much more quantitative, and I'll go over that later today as to how you do that assessment and then how do you do the quantitative calculations. So once you've gotten past this analysis stage, you'll go into design. This is your detailed design stage. This is your big jump and how much information you have as a project team, right? This is where you have your whomever is going to do the implementation, prepare a very detailed document of exactly how you're going to meet each one of those requirements. So this is your detailed design. The audience of that detailed design is obviously your implementers. It's making sure that the folks that need to do this work have very low-level system specs as to what they should be creating and that they should be following that. It's also where you have so much information now about not just what you're being asked to deliver, but how you're going to deliver it, that you should get extremely refined in your plan and your estimate. You should be able to, at a very detailed level, put together the rest of the plan. You should already have high level for the rest of the plan, but now you can get into exact task, ownership of those tasks, estimates around those tasks, because you have a very low level design. So at this end of design, you have a very big gate, which is called definitive estimate. And I say big because that makes a huge jump in the accuracy of your estimate that should exist, as well as the accuracy of your commitment in your plan. So at that point, you should be able to come in and say, hey, I know back at basis of estimate, I used this estimation spreadsheet. I've refined it since then, but nowhere in there did we know that the implementer was gonna say they had this one complication that we would have to introduce this additional piece of software. I know that now. This is why I think it costs more. So you're refining your estimate. This says plus 15 minus 10. In actuality, most places it's plus or minus 10. So at this point, schedule and cost should be very accurate because you know a lot of information about what you're going to deliver or how you're going to deliver it. And then direct and manage is really just your doing your implementation, testing, operational readiness. I say just, but it's really where the meat of most of the work is going to get done. So really that is where you start to see kind of your product being put in place and becoming real. Then the last stage is really just post-deployment. So I've gone live with it. Now I just got to do all the cleanup, wait for my invoices to come in and get those closed, paid off, like get everything done, put my product in service, which means it's used and useful, and really just wrap up this project and close it out. So this really is like your final stage just to kind of finish things up and close the project out. I referenced a little the estimate maturity at the bottom. What this does is tries to respect where you are information-wise across the project. So currently you're really minus 50 plus 50 when you put together your business case. The reason it is set to that is because we don't want you investing so much in those upfront stages that you're using all O&M dollars to do this. So if you go all the way to design and you're like in the weeds, have all the information before you get a capital project set up, then you are really missing an opportunity to capitalize some of the costs associated with putting this product. And if you know anything about utilities, financials, how revenue is generated, how budgeting, funding happens, that is definitely a sensitive area. And you don't want to overinvest before you figure out you don't want to move forward with something. So if you spend a year and all your resources coming up with a very detailed design to present a business case, and then that gets like essentially told no because they don't have funding or it's not a priority at the moment or whatever it is, you have now heavily invested a bunch of sunk costs that cannot be recovered at this point. So, but at the same time, if you're not going to get all the way to design, by the time you do a business case, there needs to be some expectation setting on the audience of that business case as to what level that estimate is. Now, that it does not say that URB doesn't want to see you at the plus or minus 10% eventually, but that it also doesn't state anywhere that you have to be at that level in order to present your business case and get your funding. You may be checking back to get these additional levels of accuracy updates to them. And they may do seed funding. They may not do all your funding. You may just be working towards that. But the goal would be you're developing a business case, not over investing in that business case before you get your funding started for your capital project. So this is how you read the stage gate process. The checklist here is really for each of these stages, a prescriptive list of things that the PM must make sure is done before they move to the next stage. It's that simple. We are doing a revision of this that will have links that clicks into the template or the tool associated with it. And then we're doing a RACI to say who's responsible for what pieces of it. So in here, if you look at where it says complete project execution plan, there's a template for that. We're going to add the link here in this next release in November, that then you would just click here and it'd bring you to the template of the project execution plan. So for all of the deliverables in here, there are matching templates that either exist in the SharePoint or built into ServiceNow. And the ops team at any point can help you if you can't find any of those items. So this is the stage gate process. This is like the biggest visual you need to keep in mind, keep close as a PM, kind of act as your main reference guide. There is one for Agile. So if your project is Agile, there is one for Agile. You'll notice the biggest difference is some of the deliverables change for Agile. So you're thinking a little bit more about backlog of epics and product roadmaps and things like that. These 3 stages here, you actually don't stop for each one of these gates and go through the gate. You really don't stop until you get to 20% of your sprints. That is when you stop and do this definitive estimate gate. So you do need to do a definitive estimate and go through that gate after you have gone through 20% of your sprints. And the thought there is after 20% of your sprints, you have enough information that you should be able to adequately plan the rest of your sprints and get a very refined estimate for those. So there is an Agile one here. Like I said, very similar. You'll just notice, some of the deliverables are changed, and that's really to reflect the stage gate methodology or stage gate SDLC. As I mentioned earlier, there is a templates folder in the SharePoint site that has, your deliverables for each of those stages checklist, project execution plan, that kind of thing. This is the area where the PMO is going to continue to add some depth and revise. It is also where we're hoping some will go away with this new project tracking system and be facilitated through that tool. Specifically, the stage gate process. As you say, I'm at this stage, I'm ready to move on to the next stage and hit a gate. The PMO, you should be able to move it to the workflow. The PMO pulls up a checklist and you say, I've done all these, and then the PMO can verify that, mark you ready to move forward. It should happen in a workflow, and that's what the new tool is going to provide. Today, I'll show you how we're doing it in an Excel sheet. Before I get to that, 2 things I mentioned before is you don't have a defined SDLC. I know in the past at PSEG, everything was Agile. That is not the case anymore. As the PM and as the GPM, you really should be thinking about what is the best fit for your project from a life cycle standpoint. And then we also provided a categorization matrix that allows you to categorize it based on different risk levels and investment levels of project, so you don't have the same rigor with everyone. The considerations, these are just some high level considerations when you're thinking about, do I go waterfall, do I go iterative, do I go agile? You know, if you have very, quickly changing requirements, you have 100% allocated team to this product that is dedicated to just doing this project and moving that functionality forward for that product, probably fit better agile. And again, these are just considerations. These are things that you should think about when you're deciding which SDLC fits this particular project. If you got a lot of heavy regulations, a lot of integrations, if it's a brand new technology, a lot of these things that needs to create a foundational implementation first. A lot of those types of things are not conducive to agile. So you may be adding more risk to your project by going agile than saving it in delivery time. So a lot of times when people say agile, what I've seen is they generally just mean do it really fast, and I don't want to have to commit to requirements right away, or I don't know enough. Those are things that may be a factor, but a main factor should be the nature of the work or solution you're being asked to put in place. Categorization matrix. So it's not one size fits all with the stage gate. We recognize it's too much for some projects and just the right amount of rigor for others. So what we did here is put some factors. I will caveat this with saying, I recommend you have a discussion with the PMO when you're doing your categorization, just to make sure that it's an appropriate categorization. If it's a large project, but you don't feel like doing the additional deliverables, that's probably not going to fly. But if there's merit to it, if it's like, hey, I'm in the millions of dollars, but this is a routine, heavy, infrastructure type project or heavy materials type project that doesn't make sense to have this much rigor, that's definitely a conversation that you should have to make sure that you're not doing more investment in overhead than needed, or oversight, should I say, than needed. If it's very visible and we're reporting out to an executive level steering committee or the board even, probably requires the rigor. So really it's just you assessing. If you look at the categories here, financial is only one category. There's also your risk level in delivery. So this is risk in actually delivering this project. And then visibility, right? Like how high up are the conversations about how well this project is performing. And then how much financial management you really need for it. So these are factors you should go through. If you fall across a couple of these, then it's going to require a discussion with the PMO to figure out what's the right level of rigor for you. If you are formal gated or heavy investment, informal gated, meaning above 250,000, you are required to have a steering committee. That steering committee should be made up of representation from all of your stakeholder groups. So you should be doing a stakeholder analysis early in your stage gate life cycle. I think it's in project initiation. Once you identify, here are all my stakeholders, this is not just business users. This is anyone who has an influence in your project. Do that stakeholder analysis and then look for leadership representation of that entire group. And that's how you should build your steering committee. That steering committee then becomes your governing body that you go to report out every month, but it's also who you go to get agreement that you're ready to move on to the next stage, and also who you go to when you have barriers that you need someone to help you remove in order to continue to stay on a good path. So you want to be very transparent with them about the risks that exist, as early as possible. And you want to make sure that conversation is one about I'm trying to manage this. This is what I'm seeing. I'm hitting this roadblock. I've gone to all of these places. This is my proposed solution. Can you help me with that? If you get to the smaller ones, generally just the project sponsor is your governing body and oversight. So that is acceptable for smaller level projects. You won't have an executive level steering committee for a tiny low risk project. So that's what you'll see this top governance looks like. We are adding PMs and controllers everywhere. The smaller ones, they're currently optional, and that's because just the overhead doesn't make sense. However, we are considering getting, one scheduler just to get those plans into P6 so that we can use that information for resource capacity reporting if it's requires a lot of internal resources that we need to manage. Same for cost. So we may end up just having one across all of the small ones to ensure that we have a comprehensive picture of the portfolio when we get to that. Oh, sorry. So once you know which SDLC you're taking, as you can see, the stages are just a little bit revised based on which one you decide. At the end of this is the tailoring. So this has all of the checklist items that are listed in that stage gate. If you're a miscellaneous effort, any of these that's just an open circle, they're optional for you, meaning only if it's relevant to your project. Detailed quantitative risk assessment for a very tiny project is not going to benefit necessarily and not going to help you more successfully deliver that. It's unnecessary overhead in some cases. So where you see an open circle, that means it is optional for this category of project. So again, not one size fits all. If you're considered formal gated, everything's required. If you're a small miscellaneous effort, as you can see, a lot of these things are not. And the same applies to Agile. Generally, miscellaneous and annual routine are not Agile projects. I think I have seen one exception since I've been here where that's the case. And then it's just a matter of, it probably ends up in your informal category unless we could justify why some of these things aren't needed. But informal gated is usually the minimum for an Agile project, just because it's dedicated teams and we tend to not bucket those projects in very small increments. It doesn't make sense for an Agile to do it that small. How do we put this in action? So as I said, eventually this flow goes into the project tracking system. Today, unfortunately, it is not there yet. So we had to come up with a way for the ops team to get notified that you're ready to go through a gate and a way for us to do an audit log of the deliverables have been completed, we're set and ready to go. I will tell you, my last organization, internal audit, looked at this stuff. Like we got a lot of auditing of this process to make sure it was being followed closely. I fully anticipate in later maturity phases of this, that will be the case for this as well. So there is a gate approval process. You would download the scorecard and there are links in the material that we're going to send out, as well as the material that's available on the SharePoint site. Once you get that scorecard, you complete it and ensure all your checklist items are there. Then you send an email to the ops team who will then review it, make sure it's fine, go back and forth if they need to, and then notify you when they're ready, when you're good. Once you get the notification from them, you're good and okay to proceed. You'll then integrate this into your next project steering committee meeting to say, hey, we've done all this, we're moving to this stage. Are you guys okay with this? And that's kind of what you'll use. Normally, you just get one email from a representative on that team saying you're good, and then that's what you save to your project artifacts. So just to kind of show you what the score, so it's an Excel spreadsheet, but this is the first tab on the sheet. The first tab gives you essentially instructions on how to fill it out. After that, you'll hit the scorecard tab. The scorecard tab is just general information at the top. You don't need to refill it out every time. And then it's going to give a running total of where you are as far as delivering to the stage gate process. Then you'll have each tab after that will match a stage. So, you know, you would fill out each of these tabs for each of your stages, and then it will summarize it up on this tab. You don't fill this bottom part out. It automatically summarizes it based on you filling out each gate. Okay. And that's all the material. And I know that was a lot, so I wanted to make sure we had a little time for questions at the end of this one. And then we're going to take a quick break after, but whoever is monitoring the questions for me, can you from the ops team, can you give me an idea of what?
Sharon, can you see the chat box, or you can't?
I can. I just assume you guys would be asking the questions, but I can go ahead and just read them myself. So since we have a go live this weekend, I'm not sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, somebody not able to attend. I've been told by PMO personnel that due to a shortage of projects to charge, current projects are being charged more than was planned. Is that true? I don't know that that is true. This is one, Naren, we may need to take back for, I'm not sure if you or Upasana want to get back with Greg on that one. I apologize, Greg. I don't have insight on the chargeback. I mean, I know we have the chargeback model. I don't have insight on exactly what's being charged, that's being managed in the ops team.
Which question is that, Sharon? I'm not sure that.
Greg's, it says, I have been told PMO personnel that due to shortage of projects to charge, current projects are being charged more than was planned. Is that true?
Oh, I don't see that, but anyway, we'll address that question maybe offline.
Okay. And then if you could just share it with the rest of the
Sure.
folks on the call.
Yep. Mhm.
If the PM isn't selected until project initiation, who performs the actions and create concept and develop business case? Good question. And the reason I say that's a good question is that it is a problem for every organization I've ever worked with and worked in as a PMO or as a PM. Normally there are, and this is a function I haven't seen here yet, like business analysts that do that. Is my understanding that here, the GPMs or the product owners have been the folks that are filling in that role, or they are requesting a PM earlier than needed. I would say if it's a large effort, a large project, that's going to require a lot of funding, very sound business case, they are requesting the PM earlier. So the PM, the latest the PM can come in is project initiation. If the dollars are available to the project sponsor and the GPM, it can be brought in earlier. For small projects, that may not make sense because the business case may be very small and concise if your basis of estimate is really small. And in those cases, I suspect they'll wait until the project is initiated to get that PM brought on board. So I've mentioned this before to other organizations as well as this one. The reason we put it in initiation is because that is the latest you should ever consider bringing in a PM, but it doesn't mean you can't do it earlier. Now, whoever does put the business case together, the first conversation they should have with the PM is reviewing that business case, discussing the basis of estimate, discussing what the problem was, what the proposed solution is, alternatives that were kind of looked at, and then the consequences that were articulated for not approving this. So whoever put it together should be very closely work with the PM pretty early to make sure the plan reflects that. If I have 2 or 3 months project, do I need to go through this process? It's the same thing that you see on there for like a miscellaneous efforts. Miscellaneous efforts are usually under 6-month projects. So if you do a miscellaneous effort, you should be fine doing that, but you still have to go through the life cycle. And the reason is because you probably still need resources on your plan, on your project. The only way we can start doing resource capacity planning is if we have the projects in the system that is able to then get visibility into the resource capacity needs. So you would be that very scaled down version in the categorization that I showed. Probably won't have a controller and scheduler assigned right away, but or until we find a solution to that. But as a PM, you still need to follow it. The stage gate process, that is, just a very scaled down version of it. What is the formal procedure to get approval for each gate? And I went through that just now with that one of the last couple of slides. So Lawrence, I don't know if this is still a question for you. If so, just type it in the chat at the bottom and I'll address it there.
No, you answered it, thanks.
Let's see. How does one know if a project is BU driven versus IT driven? BU driven is usually a project where you're solving a business problem, like you know, our work management, or should I say our field mobile app doesn't connect or doesn't allow our contractors during a storm to feed information back to our OMS system or our work management system, whatever it is. That is something that is usually coming from the business and has a business driver that's causing you to do it. An IT-driven project is generally something that we need to do to keep our systems stable and is driven by a need identified in your technology group. So, or it's like, hey, we have 12 document management systems out there. IT may propose consolidating that to less than 12 from a total cost of ownership perspective. So those are things that you would see IT driven versus I have this business need that exists that is driving this project. Because both, or technology strategy could say, hey, our technology strategy is we could save X number of dollars or provide this much reliability across all these years if we do this thing. And that would be more of like an underlying architecture change.
So to give an example on that, like network segmentation that infrastructure team is taking up, Lawrence, that's IT driven, right? So because we want to keep our lights on and keep the system at the utmost working capacity, that's IT driven. Any project that is say the utility driven, energy cloud projects, CEF projects are basically business driven.
Thank you, Naren. How does iterative project executing work? And I put one slide and it showed iterative. Let me see, I'll go back to that. It's essentially like your waterfall. You're just, as you could see, cycling through these before you close your project out and consider it done, right? Before you hit this final release and operational readiness. Iterative tends to be where you're designing, building, testing, and deploying in phases, but you're not turning it over to operations until you hit post-deployment and closing your project out. Your funding still goes through phases, right? Like a potentially foundational state. Like when I think about data analytics type system that has to create this base structure, this base foundation, then your next is creating this set of reports or this set of query capability, that kind of thing. Those usually are phases that exist, but its system is not considered complete and ready to turn over until deployment. So it's essentially the same thing, you're just going through cycles. Would be great for you to provide a training for other stakeholders involved in document approval. Absolutely. So we are, as part of the feedback we got from the PMs and our last couple of forums, planning to do a roadshow that would include going to the business groups and providing the same insight to them. I think because of everything on the plate for end of the year, they're planning beginning of next year, but the recommendation was to do a roadshow of this. We are already still starting to attend some of the business forums. So like customer ops reached out to better appreciate what we put in place and see how it's gonna affect being able to deliver some of our commitments a little bit more predictable, a little bit more successfully. And then said, okay, well, we like this, we're gonna invite you to a bigger forum. So some of that is happening, but it's not in a very orchestrated, planned out way. And that roadshow is what we're planning to do that, to address that. Because I agree, if your business doesn't even know this is happening, it's really on the PM and the GPM to sort of sell the idea that this needs to happen where really it should be on the PMO to sell that.
Yeah, just to
one-
add, sorry, Sharon, just to add a bit more on that, Sabina, you're absolutely right. There are the other groups that we interact regularly with, like security, procurement, integration COE, which is the enterprise architectural review team. So these teams are now being onboarded with us so that SGP process becomes the core process, and all these processes around us get integrated into our process. And so they are aware of what we do and what they need to get involved in what area and what stage, and what need to be submitted, what need to be reviewed, and what need to be approved by them as quickly as possible, so the project teams can continue working on the projects. Yeah, you're right, but that integration is happening, so it is in progress.
The formal process assigned to a project, what is a project code? Okay, so the formal project process for getting funding required depends on where your funding is coming from. If it's in IT, it's going to be the BCCT gate that I showed you after developed business case. If your project is being funded by Long Island or New Jersey, then they have what is called a URB, which is a utility review board that has a process that also is followed to get the funding that is documented. And when I say project code, I hope you know what this is, but it's the code that you use to charge your time. So, or charge your work. So it could be contractor, could be materials, it could be internal labor. So when you get your project set up, you have to set up your capital codes or O&M code associated with that project so we can track costs to that project specifically. When you get an invoice from a contractor, you would charge that back to your project code. At the end of the month, all of the actuals that have been accumulated by your project would then come through SAP in the actuals report, and that would be visible to you and your controller. So then you can say, I was planning to spend $100,000, my actuals came in at 80,000, but I know I have a 20,000 invoice that I processed. I need to put that in my accruals and then keep my forecast where it is. Or I only spent 50,000 and that's because I didn't get all the work done. I need to move that other 50,000 out to when the work will actually be done next month or whenever it is. And then that ends up in your forecast. But that project code is your mechanism for charging and managing the cost associated with that project. What it also does is when your project is done and you close it out and put it in service, it tracks what that capital investment was so that it can be recovered as part of a regulated utility rate case. So probably worthwhile if you're not sure, like if you haven't managed in an environment where you're managing a project code or a set of project codes for your project, we probably need to do like a little bit of a one-off on that. So let us know. How do we get security approval for the 3-4 that requires sign off? Oh, okay. So security approval in the documents themselves. So they provided templates in the documents. If you look at the templates, they say, who do you send it to? And the security team does assignments within there. So if you look at that, I think there's like a requirements one that's in, let me go back. Like this security architecture design review and security test requirements. If you look at the templates that are out there, it'll say, email this group. You will be contacted within this amount of time to set up a review of your design, like that kind of thing. So it's in that template. But it's not a single person in every case. In some cases, somebody, because they have a whole cyber team that is managing those reviews.
Got it. Quick question, Sharon, to follow up. So the StageGate scorecard, it has, you need to mark it off as approved in there. Once they reply back with their approval, do we need to attach that approval email from security to the StageGate scorecard?
No, it should be in your repository that houses all of your project artifacts. So what'll happen is when we get this, the stuff that you've marked off. So if you say I've completed, you know, my PEP, my project execution plan, the ops team is going to go look in your repository to make sure that exists out there and is using the correct template. So
I
you would
see.
just, if you got the approvals, just save it wherever you're saving your archive, and they're going to go look for it there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. That's all the questions that I see out here. We're at 2:20, so we can either take our break a little early, or are there any questions that, you know, have come up since, or anything else I can answer to add some clarity? All right, I'm gonna say at this
Sounds good,
point, we'll take a quick break. So just so you guys know, in order for us to manage the recordings, when we take a break, we have to close the session, and then you have to get back into it when you're ready to rejoin. So we'll have to do that a few times throughout the day. Unfortunately, Zoom has some limitations in how we can create the recording that is generating the need for us to do that. So we will take a break now and come back in 9 minutes at 2:30. So at 2:30, we will resume with status reporting, which is our next topic. So we'll close this out, and at 2:30, you'll be able to get back in for that session.
Yeah, you all have to join back, okay?
Yep.
Yep, thanks.